Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening. My name is Ryan Hollister. I'm the director of the Bennett Career Services Center at Salus University. I am really excited and pleased to introduce the team from ETS Vision this evening. They have a wonderful presentation for us to talk about what it is like to try to hire an optometrist in today's market. I know many of you, I recognize the names from people that have contacted the Bennett Center at Salus University, Pennsylvania College of Optometry. I know lots of people are looking for doctors. We've got an excellent class of about 150 young ODs that are getting ready to graduate in just a couple of short weeks. May 26th is graduation, and they are eager to start working. So I am really excited to hear from the ETS team. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to them, and I'm sure they'll mention this. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We want this to be an interactive discussion tonight. We want to know what's on your mind, so utilize the Zoom chat. You can send us messages, and we'll be sure to address everything this evening. So thanks again for joining us, and Sheri, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. So over 7 years ago, we had the pleasure of working with a doctor who decided to leave a high volume optical shop for something more meaningful to him. He is still at the same nonprofit we placed him in and is now the director of optometry. So this is all near his family. And we get excited to help people like him make life-changing moves, and have learned a great deal in the process of helping so many doctors make those moves. So a little bit about us. We are ETS Vision, and our team forms career-long relationships to help both new grads and those in a career transition. We have the nation's largest database of ODs, and we have been in contact with thousands of optometrists. Recruiting ODs is all that the three of us do each day. Over the years, we've learned a great deal about what attracts top talent and seals the deal. So my name is Sheri, and I cover the Northeast, including Pennsylvania. Here's my contact information, which is also in the email we sent out. We do cover the entire US, so I'll pass it off to Michael, who covers the Midwest and Western states.
Thank you, Sheri. Hello, my name's Michael, and I cover the Midwest, as Sheri said, in Western United States, along with Alaska and Hawaii. Feel free to text, call, or email me if you have any questions. I'll be here to answer the questions you have throughout the presentation. If your practice is located in any of the states shown here, I would be the one you'll be working with to fill your open positions. The part of the U.S. we haven't talked about yet is Marc's territory, so I'll pass it off to him.
Thanks, Michael. My name is Marc, and I cover the Southeastern United States, all the way from Maryland, DC metro area, Virginia, down to Florida, and all the way over to Texas. I do have a large area. Like Michael, if you have any questions about the states listed here, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm available via email, call, or text. I do a lot of texting. I know sometimes your days are filled, you can be pretty busy, so a text is really quick and easy. And just like Michael or Sheri, if your practice is physically located in one of these states, we'll be working together to fill your open positions. Since Salus is hosting and falls within Sheri's territory, I'll let her take the reins now. Sheri?
Thank you, Marc. ETS Vision is comprised of a larger team that enables us to succeed. Outside of Michael, Marc, and myself, we have two account executives who specialize in recruiting ophthalmologists. They are Amory Ridgway and Matt Johnson, shown here at the top. Beyond our recruiters, our support team helps ensure that we have the most comprehensive and accurate database of optometrists in the United States. With team members covering everything from marketing to finance, we are able to focus on what matters to you most, getting top talent into your practice. So speaking of Ben Kennedy, he will be helping and guiding the questions today, and he is in the bottom right-hand corner. Please send a message to him or in the general chat if you have a question. Ben, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheri. Like Sheri mentioned, my name is Ben Kennedy, and I will be our MC tonight Feel free to message me or the general chat if you have any questions, and I will help direct the conversation to Sheri, Michael, or Marc, depending on who can answer it best. We've been warned plenty of times that as practice owners and hiring authorities, you all will have plenty of questions, and we are certainly looking forward to answering them. Sheri will talk a little bit more about the structure of the presentation in a moment, and we look forward to hearing from you all. Sheri?
Thanks, Ben. So how do you get that top talent? What are the hiring hacks that will give you an edge in this competitive market? Hiring a new team member is one of the most important decisions you make. It can make or break your practice, determine your future, and it takes a lot of time and effort. Before knowing how to hit the target on your next hire, you need to define the target you are trying to hit. The three most important things for determining if someone is a good fit for your practice are clinical philosophy, long-term goals, and personality. If those match, you can usually work through the rest of the details. Start by actually writing down your clinical philosophy, long-term goals, and the personality needed to succeed in your practice. So every practice has different pain points. We are prepared to talk on several topics, but we don't know which pain points you have at your practice. So here's how it will work. We have prepared remarks on interview processes, employment contracts, advertising your positions, how to present your practice, the state of the market, hiring, and the value we bring to the table. We're going to explain them a little bit, then let you all choose what you would like to discuss further. So the interview process has to do with the do's and don'ts of your interview process. Employment contracts has to do with things you should include in your contract and also covers compensation. Advertising the position is about how to get your opportunity seen by candidates. Presentation of the practice can be compared to staging a house for when it is going on the market and has to do with pitching your practice to candidates. State of the market is a bit about the trends we are currently seeing. Hiring is fairly broad and encompasses when to do it, common mistakes, and sealing the deal with a candidate. And value of a recruiter is a few more points of the advantages of working with ETS Vision. So which of these topics would you like to discuss further?
And we will just give you all a moment to type out what you would like to talk more about in the chat, and give you a moment or two to do that. Right, so had a few come in, and looks like Tina messaged first. So we'll go into staging the practice, so the presentation of the practice.
Okay, thanks, Tina, for getting it started. So when presenting your practice, you are competing for the best OD talent from the best practices in the best cities in the country. You have to know what sets you apart and be able to highlight that when talking about your practice. So each one of these candidates prioritizes slightly different things. Knowing what they want allows you to highlight what they are concerned about. And we're going to cover that a little bit more in just a second. But being clear about your opportunity helps both you and the candidate determine if your big three match. The big three are clinical philosophy, long-term goal, and personality. We have found that candidates often go online to see what people are saying about your practice. So be aware of the reviews you have on Google or Glassdoor. Ask your loyal patients to leave reviews online. If your reviews are less than stellar, address them both online and with the candidate. I know we've noticed quite a few reviews, especially during COVID, when optical items were hard to come by and late coming in. Those reviews are easy to explain to a candidate. So just be prepared, because students do look at your website. They look at your Google reviews and your website. So make sure your website's up to date with recent photos. Beyond the virtual world, your practice needs to be dressed to impress. Students notice stains on your carpet or torn up chairs, and this applies to your equipment too. Students have been trained on the best and newest equipment and technology in optometry. So you need to ask yourself, how does yours compare? Are you using Internet Explorer? Do you have a Rolodex? You know, these are questions to kind of look at your practice from their point of view. Now, setting yourself apart, know your culture and who you attract. External recognition. If everyone appreciates being appreciated, so go out of your way to notice things that your team members are doing well. And being able to discuss your existing team in a positive light creates a great impression on candidates. It also creates happier employees, and it's a win-win. Now, doctors that are newer to the profession, as we said, have learned on the newest equipment during their time in school or residency. Look at your practice through their perspective. Is your equipment the same or similar quality that they're used to? And then this is the big one. Know their clamps. We have an acronym that we use called CLAMPS. And it stands for challenge. And challenge is how stimulating the work is, and can they learn new skills? Location is where your practice is located. Advancement is the ability to move up the ranks or potentially to owner. Money is what they're getting compensated, including benefits. People who they work with and those that they serve. And security, how stable the position is. Now, I also include a couple extras for the S's, including schedule, work and work-life patient flow schedule. So, you know, I include those because those are very important, especially to new grads. This is where you can really set yourself apart, is by understanding what that candidate is looking for and setting yourself apart by what you offer. For instance, if money is a clear priority to the candidate, be sure to talk about immediate compensation and future growth. Give real examples of production and talk about the cost of living in your area. Candidates might often look at a bigger paycheck and not think about how far that paycheck goes. You might live in an area where the cost of living is much lower. So we really rely on this acronym in order to determine what's important to the candidate and highlight, when we're talking with them, we highlight your practice accordingly. I hope that answers a good bit of your question, but we will cover a couple other important things real quick. Sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but I want to answer completely. So there are intangible benefits as well that private practices tend to have, which is opportunity for long-term growth. If your practice has professional development in place, low turnover, Being able to talk to a candidate about how a team member started in a similar role, has learned a great deal of new skills, and is still at the practice 15 years later shows top talent that you are worth investing their future in. Give them detailed, specific information on realistic compensation over their early career. If you have techs or office staff that really know their stuff, brag about it to students. Not having to deal with tasks that seem tedious or administrative in nature is a big selling point. And as private practices, an advantage you have on corporate is the flexibility to add a specialty, to turn someone's excitement at the idea of being an area's only pediatric optometrist into an opportunity for your practice. And then another advantage is that you can disclose that you are booked out for 5 months. So the new team member will be busy the moment they start. And 5 months might be a little long, we know, but occasionally we run into that. Corporate practices tend to keep that kind of information very close to the vest. And then another way of presenting your practice is that a big part is the entire experience. You want a candidate to appreciate what their life will look like if they join your practice. So get to know what is important to them outside of a professional context. Great school systems, neighborhoods, low cost of living, low taxes, and opportunities for their children. And the culture of your community are things that they can't see in a job description. So be prepared to talk on these topics. Potential employees like to see community involvement. If a local magazine is ever giving you kudos, make sure it is on display both virtually and in person. And be prepared to talk about nearby attractions and things to do. Talking about a concert venue, museum, park, or cheesecake factory near your office makes a difference on the impression you leave with the prospective team member. So those are our prepared comments. What other questions do you have? Either about this or something else.
And while you are typing out the questions about anything that Sheri may have said, anything you want her to expand on or clarify, or maybe you want to hear Michael and Marc and Ryan weigh in, go ahead and type those out. And while you're typing them, I had several people message me directly to talk about employment contracts and salaries.
Oh.
So Sheri, if you could go to that, please.
Absolutely. So before we get into contracts, we are not attorneys and this is not legal advice. We have made a list of things that should be in your employment contracts. This is really just a checklist. The most important thing we can tell you is to have one ready. Time kills all deals. You'll probably hear us say that more than once in this presentation because we run into it all the time. If you talk to a candidate you want in your practice, you need to be able to move quickly. So these are the items that you want to include in the contract. Term of agreement, which is the time frame that the contract covers. Benefits, what benefits your practice will provide. Compensation away from providing cover how it's going to. Expense responsibility, what expenses are whose responsibility, non-solicitation and non-disclosure clauses, restrictive covenant, non-compete, termination clause, and governing law, which court system it would be disputed in if there was an issue. And finally, the duties and supervision. So before we move on to compensation, did we have any other follow-up questions, Ben, or? should I move on?
I haven't gotten any directly. I know in preparing the presentation, Ryan had a lot of input on employment contracts and what students like to see. And so I was wondering if you'd like to weigh in, Ryan?
Not yet. No, I'll let you keep going here, and we'll
Okay.
see if any questions come in.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start on compensation. So this survey gives you an idea of income ranges. What is appropriate for your practice will be determined by what the doctor brings to the practice and the geographic location. Overall, we are seeing about $62 an hour, or about $130,000 a year, as a reasonable expectation for new graduates. So if you get into negotiations, remember that different things have different values to different people. It may cost you less to give somebody more vacation than raising compensation, but a candidate may value it more. Now, we'll just talk a little bit about benefits, because obviously compensation varies greatly according to the benefits offered. Benefits typically include covering at least a portion of health insurance, dental or vision insurance, state licensing, malpractice insurance, contributions to a 401k or simple IRA, state association fee, and CE. I know we're going to have some questions about compensation. So you can look at this survey. I'm just going to fill in a little while you get your questions together, but you can look at this survey, and this was 2021, 32 plus hours working a week. Out of 268 optometrists, 130 was their average. And I discussed this with Ryan last week, and we are definitely seeing higher compensations since COVID hit. And 130 is definitely a number I'm seeing pretty regularly with new grads this year.
And we did have a question come in on compensation. They asked, could you elaborate on determining a salary for an OD in New York City with 10 years of experience?
So again, it really, what I try and tell candidates is that what they're earning currently may be what they earn at a new practice or more. It depends on how good of a fit that optometrist is for your practice. If they're doing scleral lenses and bringing in a lot of income, in New York City, typically we see a base plus a production bonus. And I would say, 160 is not unheard of. But again, it depends. There's a lot more factors to compensation. First of all, what they bring to your practice. We have found that anybody that needs every Saturday covered is going to pay more. You're going to have to pay more to get those ODs working on Saturdays. So if your practice is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and you have an excellent benefits package, then your compensation is going to be slightly lower. It's hard for us to give us an exact amount when we don't know all of the benefits and what hours and what you're looking for. If you need someone who's fluent in Russian, can do scleral lenses, then you're going to be paying higher dollar especially if they're working on Saturdays. Does that answer your question for New York City? I'd be happy to have a more intimate discussion with you if you want to call me sometime.
And if you did opt into future contact, we will be sending another follow-up email like we did with the reminders. It will have Michael, Marc, and Sheri's contact information there. So if you want to get into a little bit deeper dive, like what is appropriate compensation for Boise, Idaho, you can go ahead and follow up there. And while we are waiting, we had a couple people ask about the state of the market.
Oh. Okay, great. So what we have found, as many of you are well aware, there is a lot of demand for optometrists and not enough optometrists to meet it. As a result, it is taking more time to fill optometry positions. This is also translated to better negotiating power for optometrists. Now, for perspective, just this evening, Ryan let us know that Salus has over 1,000 positions on their job board and approximately 150 graduates each year. Ryan and ETS Vision are both seeing students getting multiple offers. They are also getting more money, as we discussed. Estimates vary on the amount of debt for optometrists fresh out of school, but it is certainly higher than it was, and it is not out of question for it to be over $200,000. So that's one reason that compensation is a big topic for them. They are nervous about having all that debt, understandably. And with the bargaining power being in their hands, they often do not want to work every Saturday. That is definitely something that I hear daily. I'm sure Marc and Michael do as well, is that they really don't want to work that every Saturday. So I know there are probably more questions, and you might have different questions for different territories, and I'm happy to pull up our territories so that you can see who might cover your area for questions.
And we did just get a question about ophthalmology. We do recruit ophthalmologists, and you can see the different color for the state initials there. So all of the Eastern Seaboard and a few extra states, that is Amory Ridgeway's territory. And then all of the green lettered states are Matt Johnson's. Their contact information will also be in the follow-up email we send. So if you did not opt into future contact and you're regretting that decision now, go ahead and message me directly with your name and email address, and we'll make sure you get on there. And then Eugene was wondering, in regards to state of the market, are most new graduates not choosing solo or small group optometry practices?
And Sheri, if you don't mind, I'd like to respond to that question. So yeah, the new grads, for the last couple of years, we've been tracking outcomes data, seeing where they go after graduation. And believe it or not, the majority of them do go into private or group practice. Now, what those specific practices look like can really vary. But what students tell us is they are looking for opportunities to practice full scope. As Sheri mentioned earlier, they want to practice at the top and the height of their licensure. They're working with the latest, greatest technology in the clinic. They're practicing full scope at TEI and on their externship rotations. So they are saying they are interested in small private practices or group practices. That is where their interests lie. But there's a lot of different factors. We have seen an increase in the percentage of students that are going on to complete a residency immediately after graduation. In years past, that number's been around maybe 20–22%. And in the last 2 years, it has been closer to about 27–28% students that or new graduates that are completing a residency rotation. So So that's kind of what we're seeing, at least from our end at the university and working with PCO graduates. Sheri, I don't know if you have a perspective as well with the ODs that you're looking to place.
Yes, I would say private practice is definitely the majority of what we do. However, some of that is now private MD/OD practices, where the students know that they can practice that full scope optometry, as you mentioned. I would say that the vast majority of students and residents that I talk to, one of their top concerns is practicing full scope. And oftentimes equipment comes up in that conversation as a deal breaker. If a practice, we ask if a practice doesn't have an OCT or visual field, or, is that going to be a deal breaker for you? And it often is, if they want to practice that medical full scope optometry.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say here, because it was mentioned, we do have just over 1,000 jobs posted on our job board for optometrists right now, and that's the Salus University career link. I'll put the link in here if anybody would like to check that out. But I think that there's maybe a perception that students or young graduates are not interested in, quote unquote, the private or the small group practices, because unlike 10 years ago, when you would list a position, you might get 4 or 5 or even 10 resumes almost immediately. And it's not that students are not interested in those positions. It is purely the volume of jobs that are out there. And the number of OD graduates has remained relatively steady at about 1,700 a year between all 24 optometric programs in the country. We're still at about 1,700 as we've been for maybe the last decade. But you can see just the volume of jobs that are being advertised on our job board, SUNY and all the other schools, as well as the big national job boards. That's why we're not seeing those multiple applications and resumes coming in for the jobs that you might be listing for your practice.
And that provides, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. The number of job boards, if you want to place, if you're looking for a candidate, we post the position everywhere pretty much. And there's a lot of job boards. It's a lot of work to do that, to get them posted. Remember that they are looking at job boards, but if they're looking at the Salus board and they go on tonight at 8 o'clock, maybe they'll go through 20 and look at 20 positions. And, the sheer volume that the bigger groups and corporate have as far as positions listed everywhere, private practice, your one position can get buried in those job boards. And unfortunately, it's just not seen very quickly. We definitely hear private practice is a very desirable practice modality for new grads and residents.
And we did get to cover a little bit of advertising the position here, and I know, Colleen, you asked about it earlier, so if you'd like for us to expand a little bit more on it, we can. And while we're waiting for her to message, we did have someone say that they heard recently that it's estimated they would have to offer $15K more in every year for every 30 minutes they are outside a major metro area, and they wanted to know if that's correct. And I know, Marc and Michael, you have some major cities in your territories as well. So if you'd like to weigh in on the 15K for every 30 minutes outside of a major metro area.
Michael, you want to lead off or?
I'll tell you, you go ahead and lead off. You're the
Okay.
senior here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about, that's an interesting figure, every 30 minutes, but certainly without any doubt, let's just take, I'm in the Southeast, let's just take a really great state to practice optometry, North Carolina. Very tough state to get a license, unfortunately. They only offer the boards, you sit for them twice a year. So like late July, early August, and then again in late January, early February. And if there's a good percentage of ODs that don't pass the boards the first time, they've got to wait a full 6 months to take them again. But an example of that is like if you look at the Raleigh-Durham area, and then you start, that's a very popular area. You've got, of course, Charlotte is the highest growth area in North Carolina, but you've got lots of areas everywhere, the coastal, Wilmington, which is very few jobs in the coastal. But if you start looking out 30, 45 minutes from Raleigh, same thing from Charlotte, it could be some areas that are low population. A lot of people necessarily, they might not want to live there, but they can certainly live within 20, 30 minutes of a major metropolitan area, and they might commute another 20 or 30 minutes to a really great position. So somewhere in Raleigh, they might be offering something like, 120, 125 base salary, plus production bonuses, benefits, and everything like that. But then they get out there a little further, and they're going to be offering, if it's a busy, good practice, a medical-based practice, you're going to see the base shoot up to 130 to 140 or better. In some cases, even 150. Then production on top of that. So you can start factoring it certainly by the rural areas, and it's a busy practice. And if it's, North Carolina is a very medical state too. So you get to practice a full scope model there. It's just a great state to practice. The climate's great and everything else. So yeah, that sounds fairly reasonable. I mean, 15,000 for every, I think if you get up within an hour or something like that, you could expect to make another 25 or 30,000. I think that's an interesting figure. I've never really heard that exactly.
Yeah, I'd like to mention a little bit too. I have seen some of what Marc has said. Now I'm more in the Midwest, so you don't have the a population growth out there, so to speak, in a mile range, per mile range. It may not be as much on the East Coast at times as it is in the Midwest. And so you're going to, that 15,000, that's pretty good around cities when you go outside. But then when you get more rural, and then you look outside of that, you're going to probably be staying almost the same, because you're not leaving a city, so to speak, because cities usually will pay you a little less, and then they pay you more when you go out. That's a general rule of thumb. But what I have seen in that, just a reminder at times, that as much medical as you can do is just wonderful. At times, unfortunately, you'll find that you can make more money doing more comprehensive exams and less medical. That in our field, at times we do see that as well. So that's just a consideration if you're looking at pay only. And of course, when you go outside a city, you're going to do more medical in general, because you're the land around you, I see like the cities and stuff that would attract MDs, there's not as many out there. So it behooves a OD practice to have an OCT, to do more medical, so they're not sending their patients to drive a half hour, 45 minutes to see an MD.
Yeah, they're not referring as many patients, certainly. Yeah, they're going to be able to do a lot more of it.
It's easier for them, the cost to justify, to do that medical as well. Where when you get into the city, since you have a lot more MD practices, they can kind of get away with not doing as much medical at times, because a block or two down the road, there's a MD practice for the patient to go to.
Great, we appreciate your input, Michael and Marc. We did have a question coming in regarding fees, and Eugene asked earlier about the value of a recruiter. So Sheri, if you could expand a little bit on the value proposition of an recruiter and how much it costs to work with ETS.
Okay, thank you, Eugene. So our one and only focus is recruiting optometrists and ophthalmologists for independent practices and groups around the country. We work hand in hand with you through the process. We are not a resume forwarding service. Any given month, we make more than 10,000 individual touches with practices and candidates through phone calls, emails, postings, social media, internet postings, texts, mail, and referrals. Clients come back to us. We've grown every year since 2009, and 2/3 of our business is repeat. My boss also wanted me to include, he gave me a great figure today, and it's that half of the non-repeat is referral. So our clients are using us again as they grow or as life changes, and then they're also referring us to their friends. So there is no downside financial risk to using ETS Vision. Our fees are charged on a contingency basis. So all of our upfront recruiting work, all our calls, emails, postings, networking, screening, write-ups, all of that is done at no charge. The only time a practice owes us a fee is if they hire someone we present. So we are only successful if you make a successful hire. And as a reminder, we have the nation's largest database of optometrists. We really do try to advocate for your practice. We reach out to candidates that aren't actually looking. Right here we have this graph. Approximately 12% might be actively looking. And then you have some that are 13% or so that are casually looking. So they might look at a job board once or twice a month. And then you have those passively looking who will listen. And that is where our real strength is, because we reach out to those candidates. So our database and reaching out, we do the work you don't have time to do.
May I add a little something to this as well?
Sure.
Sheri did a great job. When we say reach out, just to define that just a little bit more, we have one of the largest, if not the largest database in the country. And that database is full of personal email addresses and personal cell phone numbers of these doctors, because that's the best way and the only way we can really reach them. And the other thing is about if you have an opening in an area that's full-time, we have what we call reloads in our database. These are doctors that said, hey, I'd like to go to Pennsylvania sometime, or I know I'm in Missouri, but if an opening in Pittsburgh would come up, or Philadelphia, let me know. So when Sheri gets a listing, she'll send out to doctors in the area, in the state, I'm sure, and then she'll also go to reloads. And these people are not actively looking, but if the right opportunity comes along, they're going to give Sheri a call, and Sheri's going to present them. And that's something that we can offer that no advertisement, no job listing is going to be able to do for you.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks.
And we talked a lot about the value of a recruiter. I think, I'm sorry for phrasing it poorly, I believe they were asking for a specific price for how much we charge.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yes, so our fee for hiring a full-time OD, because we base it on different days. So it's based on the number of days you work, and we can go into that individually, if you have questions. But our total fee is 6 monthly payments of $2,750 a month. So you make those 6 payments after when the doctor starts, we bill you then. And the reason we set up those 6 monthly payments is because, for one, we want them to generate you income. so that it makes it easier for you to make the payment. And the other reason is that almost all of our new clients, one of the first questions they ask is, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? And as we said, this has to be a win-win situation. If you part ways with that doctor for any reason during that first 6 months, the fee is prorated. So that's why we break it out into those 6 monthly payments. And the total for a full-time OD, the total amount that you would pay after the 6 months payments, the total is $16,500. And again, that's broken out into 6 monthly payments. And rarely do we have anybody call us and say it's not working out. If it isn't working out, you'll typically know pretty quickly in the first 30 days with a personality conflict. But because we're interviewing them and you're interviewing them and vetting them, we rarely have that happen. And if anyone would like specific information on that, we're happy to email you a copy of our contract with all of the dollar amounts.
And we've had an opportunity to bounce around a lot. So I think we would still like to talk about the interview process. Yes, I was just about to get to your message, as if on cue.
Somebody asked about, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. So an interview process is meant to measure a candidate and see if they are 1 or maybe 2 rings from that bullseye. In this candidate-driven market, they are measuring you and they know they have options. So you want to lay everything out from the start, telling them what the entire process, the interview process looks like up front, is respectful of their time and yours. Ideal candidates have options, and being ambiguous will encourage them to take the bird in hand. So be respectful of their time so that they're respectful of your time. The team members you want have worked diligently to make their time valuable. So be prepared at every stage and respond quickly. I mentioned before, time kills all deals. I can't tell you how often we see that in this business. You want to maintain momentum with candidates so you can strike while the iron is hot. And if you're using our services, we are here to help with that. Have clear expectations for new team members. This is something you need to do from the get-go. So continue to set expectations and explain responsibilities clearly, and be open about anything that may be less appealing about the job, like working on weekends. If you avoid talking about something that might be a deterrent, then when the candidates find out about it, you will have lost credibility. Ryan and I talked about this a lot. Students want to know everything. If there is any gray area, the students want it clarified. For example, if they're going to have to be on call or if they have evening hours, they want to know what days of the week and specific times. So we recommend that you listen for what is important to them. And the reason is because each candidate is willing to change jobs for at least one of 6 specific reasons. And in order to determine if a candidate is a right fit for your practice, you really need to understand which of these factors is most important to them and if your practice fits their needs. Again, we go back to that clamps. Finding out which of these is most important to them allows for you to customize your pitch of your practice. So again, it's challenge. Some optometrists really want to know that they're going to be able to grow and do more and reach out into the community. Location, you can't change your location, but you can absolutely match it to their needs or their desires or their hobbies. Advancement, if they're going to be able to grow within your practice. Money, We've discussed money quite a bit, but again, it's not only money, it could be benefits, that type of thing. People, the people that they work with, if you have got an amazing team and low turnover, again, you wanna match that up, and security. So those are all things that are important. Now, as far as the actual interview process, everything should be clearly communicated. You don't want applicants ever wondering what's next. If they are flying in, pick them up from the airport. It gives you the opportunity for a less formal introduction. And when they're coming in the practice, have the interview area prepped and clearly communicate to all team members that there will be an interview. We've had interviews scheduled in a room where a sales rep had catered a lunch. So communicating with the team allows them to be welcoming once the candidate comes in. Having your staff say, "Oh, Dr. So-and-so, we have been excited to have you in. Let me show you to the interview room." Or that makes a strong first impression, certainly a lot stronger than, "Oh, there's an interview today." And when you're scheduling the interview, allow for downtime. If a candidate has made the trip to visit your practice, give them a tour of the community. You're trying to give them a strong idea of what living in the area will look like. You want to get the image of living in your area in their heads. And then, of course, some basics, a simple yes or no test when reviewing a resume is if they have the requisite knowledge and skills. And you should be able to see that through their schooling, training, and residencies. Turning real experience into real numbers adds clarity. Where possible, ask them to support with numbers or estimates. Obviously, new grads aren't going to have as many, but beware of individuals that change jobs frequently. Hiring a new associate is costly, and you want the best return on your time and efforts. If they have a reason why they've switched positions, you can discuss that, but it's always something to ask about. And always ask for and check references. They always have something that will prove valuable when making your selection. And then as far as once you have the candidate in, again, you're really trying to measure the big three: clinical philosophy, long-term goal, and personality. If those three match, then you can work through the other things. Measuring those can be difficult, and we've written some questions that help you get a read on these major factors that will determine if you extend an offer. And if you signed up for future communications from ETS Vision, we're going to send those out, the links to those blogs after tonight. And if you haven't, then, and you're regretting it now, please send your email in the chat and we'll include you in that follow-up to this presentation. And again, I want to say that these are the things: the challenge, location, advancement, money, people, and security. Those are the things that when we're talking with candidates, we're asking them, if you had to pick which of these things are the most important to you, are there any deal breakers? And we're finding out, having these conversations with them so that we can help our clients make a great match.
Sheri, if I could just add, to your point about students really want clarity.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know the details. Sheri and I actually had a conversation last week, and this is a case in point of students that want the details. They want to know. They would really like to see those things reflected in an employment contract. But we had a student who had done their interview. And after the interview, got the contract, there were some questions and there were some emails back and forth between the student and the doctor. And, it was quite obvious that there was a little bit of a breakdown of communication. She was asking for clarity on some terms of the contract. And the doctor was coming back and making some concessions that it was obvious over the course of these several emails that that they weren't going to make any more changes. And so, to the student's credit, she reached out to have a person-to-person, face-to-face conversation with this individual to address things that were going on. But it was a prime example of how, emailing back and forth can really complicate things sometimes. Things get lost in translation in emails. It's really best to prepare these things and be able to talk about them up front, whether it's when you're in the interview or anything that you discuss with a candidate in an interview. Make sure it is reflected accurately in a contract that you eventually offer to that doctor. You want to avoid that back and forth as much as possible, and save both of you the headache.
And Ryan, I'll just add to that since we talked about that, that it was definitely a communication issue. And I truly believe that in this instance, she probably would be okay with it without it being in the contract specifically, if the doctor had explained it in more detail and made her, just communicated more effectively. Along with time killing all deals, lack of communication is a huge issue that we see, whether it's in the very beginning. I had a candidate reach out to me asking about the client hadn't contacted them, and contact the client, and the client said, oh, I was waiting to hear from them, and vice versa. That happens all the time. That is one of our primary jobs, is to keep communication flowing and to find out any questions or concerns, because you doctors, you owners are so busy. We understand, and you don't interview every day. And so there are just things that we know from talking with so many candidates that help, and communication is just hugely important. As you said, especially these new grads, do love clarity, but really anyone does.
I am not getting any questions directly to me. Ryan, I know in past presentations, people have messaged you directly as well. So have you gotten any messages?
No, nothing direct to me. And I think we've covered everything that was sent in the general chat.
Right, and if we could expand any more on any of these, or maybe your practice is in a specific geographical location and you'd like Michael or Marc to have their input, feel free to send a message in the chat and we will give you a few moments to do so. And also, while you're typing those out, shameless plug for our blog. We have a lot of great articles on there. I know we talked about the interview process and didn't have the time to go into a couple dozen example questions to ask during the interview process, but I'm sure you will have to ask a lot of questions during your interview process. So we will be sending some links to our blog and you'll be able to see some of those example questions we recommend specifically for recruiting optometrists.
And while we're doing shameless plugs, I'll also say the Salus University Career Link job board is one other place where you can go to post your position. We've talked about job boards, but nonetheless, even though we have a very large number of positions on our job board currently, it is one of the most direct routes to getting your job in front of the eyeballs of a fourth-year optometry student at PCO, as well as graduates from the program. Both students and alumni have access to our job board as job seekers, If you yourself are an alumni from PCO, you can set up an account as an alumni as well. But more importantly, to advertise your position, you want to register for an employer account. And I did put that link in the chat. There's a lot of other great features in there. We advertise events that are happening through the Bennett Center, if we're holding any on-campus career fairs, and just other opportunities to get in front of and make yourself visible to our students. The Bennett Center is one place that you can connect with us and have a conversation with me. I'd love to hear about your practice and see what we can do on our end to help.
And while we've been plugging ourselves, we did have a question come in. So Dan is wondering, at what point do you know that hiring an associate is hopeless and you should just give up?
Oh my goodness, never. It only takes that one right person. Not everyone doesn't want to work Saturdays. Not everyone wants medical optometry. Not everyone wants anything. So never give up if you're interested in hiring, but certainly contact us if you've gotten to that point. It sounds like you definitely need a recruiter. We don't give up on our clients. And like I said, it just takes that one right person.
And we did have another question come in about a competitive salary to offer an experienced OD in the New Jersey, New York area for full-time work, more specifically medical OD.
So I cover New York and New Jersey, and I often see, especially in highly medical practices, a base plus a percentage. Now, what that percentage is, if it's a base plus once you hit 2.5 times your salary, it's a percentage. Again, depends on the types of exams or what's going to benefit your practice. You need to set it up, obviously, to do that. But you can do a higher base with a lower percent of production, or you can do a lower base with a larger percent. The optometrists that I work with that are in highly medical practices that are with a base plus production, oftentimes in New Jersey are in the 160, 180 range, can be higher depending on the practice and how many patients, obviously, that they're seeing. And I wish I'd be happy to talk with you more and try and figure out, if you're offering a full benefits package that's worth, say, $15,000, we want to take that into account. But if you want somebody who's comfortable with medical optometry, residency trained, or has years experience in an ophthalmology setting or a highly medical optometry setting, then typically those salaries are 160 and above, probably.
Similar question, what is a competitive salary for an OD in Philadelphia?
So Philadelphia, again, is a larger city, so it might be on the lower range, unless, of course, you want every Saturday. But if it's a highly medical or even optical, I would still say we're seeing new grads in the 130 range, pretty close to Philadelphia, and not. Trying to think if we've got, I'm trying to think of the last person. I definitely talked with an OD a couple weeks ago. I think they're about 35 to 45 minutes outside of the city, and they're making 170. They've been out for, I think it was around 5 years, but they're in a base plus production setting right now. So your base could be, you could have a 130 or 140 base and then allow them to make production, figure out according to your metrics, be prepared to have your metrics, the types of exams, number of exams, patients per hours, those types of things to discuss with them. And also, again, refer back to that clamps and see if there's something else that could make them make a change other than just strictly salary.
And we had a question more specifically for you, Ryan. Someone is wondering, how much education do the new grads have about the business of optometry?
Yeah, so we do cover practice management as part of the curriculum for the optometry program. I believe the practice management course is in the spring semester of their third year. And there is a little bit of practice management that is continued through their fourth year while they're doing their externship rotation at the Eye Institute. So that's I think it's a 10-week course, practice management, but it covers a whole host of topics. So, the answer is, not an overwhelming amount of business, simply because there is not the time to do it. A lot of our now, but I will say this: the students that are interested in private practice or practice ownership potentially in the future, they're a pretty involved group of students. It's not an overwhelming number, but the private practice club on campus is a very active group. And through the Bennett Center and through the private practice club themselves, I let that group have quite a bit of autonomy. But we coordinate a lot of guest speakers to come in and talk about practice management and the business side of optometry and what it's like to own and manage and practice optometry as a private practice owner. So there are opportunities to learn, and there are options. We have some articulation agreements with local universities in the Philly area that have much better and more robust business programs than we do at Salus. And we have the opportunity to take some additional courses and certificate programs if in fact they are interested in learning more about business management, finances, and that side of practice management. So. But a lot of them, if they are looking to purchase a practice after they graduate, a lot of times it is maybe a 3 or 5 year process, and they're looking for mentorship. So if you're someone that is looking to transition out of your practice, retire in a few years, I think an ideal setup for a new grad would be to come and work in your practice as an associate for a couple of years, learn the practice, learn the business side, work with you as a mentor, and then you transition over a period of a couple of years.
That also helps with their student debt to get it down a little bit before they look into purchasing.
It does, and Sheri shared some of those numbers earlier. It is not uncommon for a new grad to leave optometry school with combined total from undergrad and grad school of $200,000 to $250,000 of debt, and that makes them very, very nervous about borrowing, $1 million or 1.5 to purchase a practice outright.
We have someone wondering if it is harder to find VTOD candidates.
I would say yes, just because proportionately there aren't as many interested in specific specialties. But that's what we do. That's definitely an instance where it definitely pays to have a recruiter, someone who has farther outreach that can pull from. if Michael interviews a candidate and they say that they're interested in vision therapy, he puts that into our database. And then if one of us has a practice looking, we're reaching out to everybody.
Yeah, I think that niche is certainly at the top of the list. Is much harder as opposed to something like someone that's got a residency in cornea or specialty contacts or things like that. There's just such a lower percentage of ODs that prefer to practice vision therapy, although there's still a lot of them out there. But I've got a search in Texas right now for it's only a vision therapy practice, and that's all he wants. It's definitely a tougher search, but
and I have a candidate looking for a vision therapy practice.
So yeah,
but not in Texas.
That's right. They have to. It's only usually going to be a 1 or 2 regions. Somebody considers they're already in a region that they don't really want to relocate somewhere typically. But so yeah, it's tougher. But that's what we have in our database. We have them broken down into the different fields that it's helpful.
Great. We have someone who is wondering if the following still holds true. In ascending order of who makes more, first would be retail or chain practices, 2, OD hired by an MD, 3, OD hired by OD, and 4, VA hospital / teaching.
Wow. So that I would say that corporate, that is a first of all, very broad. And oftentimes corporate might pay well out of school, but over the long term, that OD might have been able to make more in a private practice setting. So corporate oftentimes will pay the same amount to someone who's been out 10 years versus not right out of school. And where private practice typically increases compensation. Also, not every MD OD practice pays a percentage of collections or productions, and not every OD that goes to work for an ophthalmology practice wants to see 4 to 6 patients per hour. So there's a lot of variables. I've talked with a lot of successful private practice owners that are very willing to pay their doctors a very nice base salary and a very nice production where ODs can make $200,000 a year. So I definitely think that typically if you're working Saturdays, you're going to pay more for whatever your practice modality is. But I think that income, production-based or incentive-based, as you can see, they're typically making good compensation, and that there's a lot of opportunities. Corporate does pay well, but are they the most desirable?
Well, and there's a huge difference between seeing 4 to 6 patients an hour in a corporate setting as opposed to 4 to 6 patients an hour in a medical ophthalmology practice, where you have really everything is completely worked up for you, and you might have multiple techs, you might have a scribe even, and they're still getting a really good exam. They're going to have a great exam even though you're going through but you come right into the exam itself, and you're just focusing on the exam thing too. And I've got a lot of great ophthalmology practices in Virginia, South Carolina, et cetera, that with their base and bonus, and especially their collections, once you get in and going after a year or two, a lot of the ODs are making 170 to 200,000, especially after the first year, and they get a flow for the office. And yeah, it's a really pretty big, and there's a lot of private OD practices too that just have a great patient basis, and certainly they can earn 150 plus.
And again, if you're competing, which you are, everyone's competing against everybody else, you want to make sure, if money is their top priority, and you're a private practice that focuses on patient care or aren't ready to compensate somebody that high until they can produce for your practice, then you need to maybe find somebody where other things are as important or more important than money.
Say something here on OD practices and ODMD practices versus retail chains. I think you really should take a good look at how they put up a bonus package or an incentive package. Now, because it may take you a year or two to really ramp up to hit that package fully that they're offering. And 9 times, in my opinion, out of 10, you're going to make more than the retail chain down the road, but you're going to have to maybe put in 2 or 3 years, whatever, to get up to that level. So it's just something to consider.
Michael brought up a really good point. I know that when my son graduated from college and moved into an apartment, he had to have a $3,000 deposit for a security deposit. A sign-on bonus, maybe $5,000 to $10,000, could be a lot cheaper than a higher salary over time. And it could really help a candidate, especially someone coming out of residency or out of optometry school, really help them with their transition. That might be very valuable to them. Also, don't forget to compare your cost of living in the area, your housing costs, those types of things. There's some great calculators online that you can find that can show cost of living. And again, money is just one item on clamps. Pitch your practice through their desires. We hear a lot of candidates wanting work-life balance, and those are key words we hear. And as Michael said, you can show somebody long run compensation versus, if they're making steady income somewhere else. And some are more interested in PTO or vacation as well, that maybe the corporates aren't as flexible on, because they might have family that lives across country or even out of the country that they want to go visit every year or during the holidays. The flexibility that you have on creating packages and creating work environments is something that typically corporates and larger groups don't have.
I'd also say if you get a chance to brag about having very low turnover in your practice, to me, that has perked up many college grads that I've spoken with. They like that reassurance that where they're going, that they don't have high turnover, of course, and that it's not unusual for someone at their practice to have 5 or 10 years there easily in the office. And so I think that's a real good selling point when you're discussing the whole package to the candidate.
It's huge. That's huge. And Google reviews, if you have excellent Google reviews and your patients love you and your employees obviously have stayed long-term, those are, again, intangible benefits that make a person's work life much better, a higher quality, and it means something to them.
Yeah.
We did have a question come in on what a good tool to use is when comparing rates of cost of living for someone who's moving from one place to another.
So there's several online. Ben, you might be able to help out more with this. I think Bankrate and Smart Asset.
Yep, Bankrate and Smart Asset both have them. You can just Google those names. NerdWallet has one. It's a little bit more geographically confined, so you're probably not going to find your city on there if it has fewer than 100,000 people. So it's a little bit less comprehensive, still has good information if that city applies to you. So Bankrate and Smart Asset are two that we use regularly.
And right now, availability of real estate. If you have real estate that's available in your area, that's something that has prevented candidates from making a change at this time that we've seen. The difficulty finding a home.
And I am not seeing any other questions coming in. We mentioned towards the beginning of tonight that we will be posting this on YouTube. So if you would like to reflect on any of this, feel free to visit our YouTube channel. It is ETS Vision. It'll be posted in the next couple days here. And we will also be following up with our contact information, links to our blogs, and a little bit more information about our ophthalmology recruiters that was mentioned earlier, and also the link to post your job onto Salus's job board. Ryan, is there anything you'd like to add to the closing remarks?
Just want to say thank you. This was really great information. As we talked about, we know how difficult it is and to find an OD right now. So everything we talked about hopefully can help all of you in your search. And ETS has been a great resource. Great, contributor to help for our students in finding jobs, and hopefully they can help you too if you want to reach out to them. So I want to thank Ben, Sheri, Michael, and Marc for everything that they've done for us tonight and over the last couple of months. Yeah, my sincere thanks to all of you.
We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Look forward to more great stuff in the future.
Yeah, have a great night, everyone, and we look forward to working with you all in the near future. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep.
Good night, everyone.